Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Wisdom and Grit podcast. My goal with this show is to introduce you to the men who build the world and create lives of impact so that we can celebrate them and work together to fulfill the call of masculinity in our homes, our communities, and the world. I'm your host, Corey Huddleston, and on today's episode, we're going to be covering how to influence and build people who think opposite of us. It's totally needed in today, just the back and forth that everybody's doing. So today's guest is a man that I've gotten to know over the past few months. He's a self-proclaimed mental hygienist whose mission is to inspire people to have the guts to follow their guts. He is inquisitive and encouraging, and he's willing to have the hard conversations that challenge and be challenged, and embrace the complicated topics with an open mind in an effort to discover truth. And even though we're polar opposites in some areas, he challenges me to be a stronger leader. So please help me welcome my friend, Talmadge Spicer. Thanks for being here, buddy. Appreciate you,
Thanks
man.
for having me on. I'm super excited. That was an amazing, and that's probably the best intro I've ever gotten.
Hold on a minute. Let me get you here. Boop, boop. There we go. Sorry about that. Yeah, dude. Well, you deserve it, man. We've been going back and forth on Facebook for a while, and man, getting to know you has been a real pleasure, man. And I always appreciate the depth that you bring to the conversation, and like I said, even we're polar opposites on some stuff, and I know I probably get at your goat a little bit, and you at mine, but like, man, that's the beauty of having people around you who think. So,
Absolutely. Iron sharpens iron, right?
yeah, man, and I always appreciate that about you. Well, we've got some guys here watching too, so they may pop in with some questions here and there. So, um, looking forward to it. So, dude, first of all, there's a lot that I didn't cover in the intro, and I kind of want to dive into your backstory a little bit and give people some context on where you're coming from. I know originally you're from New Jersey, and now you're living in LA. And you've got a lot of really cool posts and stuff where you've just been encouraging people and challenging them to think, and you put stuff out there that um, takes it to the next level. So what is it that inspires you to kind of be that guy?
Well, if I'm gonna be if I'm gonna be completely honest, it was my student loans that pretty much gave me a mental switch. When I went to school just thinking that that's what you do, right? My grandmother
Yeah.
helped me co-sign some loans to go to school, and I didn't really have a goal or a long-term plan for what I was going to do with a degree. So when I found myself leaving school with over $150,000 in debt, oh, now I had to figure something out, right? So
Yeah.
I had two options to either give up or get creative. I feel very happy about my decision to get creative, and I started to read books. And Rich Dad Poor Dad was the first book that opened my mind to the financial possibilities that all depend on your mentality towards it, right?
Yeah.
So fast forward, just going down that track, I ended up in a bunch of different entrepreneurial opportunities and hit a brick wall. But the brick wall wasn't with my business. My business was actually doing really well. It was my internal conversation that had deteriorated. I was in a relationship that wasn't really supportive of me being so far away. I did move from New Jersey to Idaho to run this business, and depression set in. So what I've redirected myself towards is not so much having successful businesses, but helping people have successful businesses, because I felt as though I was blindsided. I felt like if I did all of the things that I needed to do in my business, I'd be successful and everything would be all good. But turns out there is a lot of internal work that needs to happen, and I didn't hear too much about the internal work, the meditation, the prayer, the goal setting, the visualization, all these different things. So I started the Uncle Sonny project, and it's all about helping people build relationships with themselves so that they can have the guts to follow their guts, get out of the 9 to 5 lifestyle, and move into a entrepreneurial one.
That's cool, man. So from there, you took off. You went to L.A., I guess, from Idaho. That's
Right.
kind of a
Well,
big shift, I think, too. Kind of going from there to Idaho. But
absolutely. First,
yeah,
before I did that, I turned tail and ran back home. So
okay,
I went back to New Jersey. I worked a job for a year, like an exact year. Like I quit on the same day that I got hired the following year. I just realized it wasn't for me. I mean, it was a really good job. It had really good pay, benefits, everything that you look for in a job. But the work wasn't meaningful. It just didn't mean anything. And I was working extra long hours. it wasn't sitting right with me. So I left that, took some time for introspection, and then moved to Louisiana for 3 months first,
Oh,
and then
wow.
went to LA.
So you've had quite a bit of shifting just trying to find the path, man. Sounds like. That's crazy. So you mentioned at one point we were talking through and you kind of like preparation for the show and you talked about personal responsibility. And I know we've had some discussions about your school debt at points and times. And I don't know, it looks like your mindset might have changed to some degree in regard to some of our conversations, but I'm interested to kind of hear like what does personal responsibility mean to you first and foremost, and then we can kind of dive into that a little bit.
Well, as you say, just the term personal responsibility, I think I want to dive in and tweak that a little bit because I do believe the more responsibility you are able to take, the more control you are also able to take, right? Every time you blame somebody, you give them the power to control an aspect of your life.
Right.
So when you say personal responsibility, it's kind of limited to what's going on in what you consider your personal space.
Yeah.
So I don't know what you would call it, but maybe responsibility overall, because you know, even if it's not happening in your country, if it's not your fault, if it's not in your community, if you were to take responsibility for it, your perception of it would change, and then you would have the power to influence it,
Yeah.
right? But so many of us, and I think it's actually going to tie in really well with what we're going to talk about today. So many of us consider an aspect of their world to be other, to be outside of their personal,
Yeah.
experience.
Yeah.
Therefore, they don't take responsibility for it, even if they're the most personally responsible person. If this thing is outside their personal responsibility realm, it's out of their realm of influence.
Yeah.
And I think if we all took responsibility, let's say even just for the country, all the communities in the country, I think we would have better relationships.
That's, I mean, a great point. It's interesting because I've had a lot of conversations with people over time, and I've personally been the kind of guy who's more apt to kind of take on responsibilities like that, or at least see providing solutions as more of an outcome than rather sitting back and kind of watching it all unfold and just complaining about it. But at the same time, that stuff can get overwhelming, and it seems that uh, with all it is like the world kind of coming down around us a lot of times, to be frank. Um, taking on and making a lot of what's going on our own internal battle, like, is that wise?
I think so. I think so. I think that the first challenge, the first objective should be to become the person that has the capacity for that type of thing. Because I know a lot of us we shy away from that type of thing because we fear that we may crumble ourselves, that we may meet our own demise by accepting and loving things that we don't typically agree with. But I think that there's a bigger picture, a bigger goal, a bigger power at work that isn't going to let you demise for simply loving, every different types of people and different types of situations. I think that we're a lot stronger than we think we are.
Hmm. It's interesting perspective. Yeah. I think, yeah, it's a hard road, man, because, like, I mean, you open yourself up to too much stuff, and then, it's like, then you start going into almost an identity crisis, it seems, right? Like for most people, I guess that's probably what you're talking about on the demise thing. But it's like I think it's important to go out and have those conversations with people, and we need to love each other for sure, and go out there and try to figure out solutions. But there also is a lot of just battles going on, at least culturally within our country. I mean, forget the world at this point. Like just like what we have going on in our country is enough to figure out, right?
Yeah.
And so when we come together and we're trying to find those solutions, there are people, and this is a good friend of mine told me about this, but he was talking about like lifeguards, they'll when they're training a lot of time, like what they're taught is if somebody's out there drowning, that you don't go and save them if they're thrashing around. You have to let them kind of come to the end of themselves, and then because otherwise you're going to get taken out with them, So I don't know in what perspective you're kind of talking about from that, if it's more theoretical and idyllic, or if it's like actually getting in their hands on and trying to figure stuff out. But if you get in there and you're trying to save everybody all the time and trying to do all those, like it can take you down, I believe.
Right.
I mean,
I
yeah,
didn't mean to cut you off or
no,
anything.
you're good.
Well, interesting point, and I think that most people will automatically go towards that way of thinking. Like, if I save other people, then I'm gonna put myself in danger. But when it comes to taking responsibility, I think I was just reading this book. It's can you curse on your podcast?
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah, cool. Because the
depending
title
on
of the book, you
okay, yeah,
probably already heard of it, "The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck."
yeah,
Right. So in that book, he talks about responsibility as much more than actually taking action towards something. That sometimes realizing what your responsibility is to not respond to certain things as well.
yeah,
Because, like in that situation, two dead people are, isn't going to help anybody.
right,
Right. So if I jump in and you're thrashing and now we're both done, then it's not going to help anybody. But it's still the lifeguard's responsibility for that life. So he's making
yeah,
a decision based on the responsibility that he's taking. If he would have said, "No, that's not me, that's not my responsibility," and just let the man thrash until he just died, well, is that a good lifeguard?
yeah, not at all, no.
Right. So you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, I think that's the hard part about all of this discussion, right? Is you get in and it's like it's not as easy as just a black or white answer, right? It's
Right.
more of a there's definite like safeguards and stuff that are in place, and they're not always clear what those are. I don't know. I'm more discussing this with you as we're going through because I have a lot to learn in this area as well. Um, and
That's
you've
the point of the conversations. That's why I put a lot of stuff out there. I actually hope to be wrong a lot of the times, that somebody will come up and offer me a alternative perspective that I can consider.
Yeah, and
You
that's
know,
always something I've appreciated about how you engage, man. So, um, whenever like you talk about kind of the solution side of things, you started up a group called Make America Talk Again, and there's a lot of conversations going on inside of there. And there is like this massive belief out there. It seems like right that like no matter which side you're on, that somebody there's always something wrong with everybody else, and it's like so foot digging your heels in the ground and all this kind of stuff. Like, how do we break through that?
I think it's our egos. I think that when we realize that each individual person both has flaws and things that we would really like about them, including yourself, especially yourself, then you allow other people to be human, to make decisions based on the information that they have, based on the place that they were grown up in. We're so much of us are products of our environment, whether we like it or not, because that's just how our subconscious works. It picks up on information that we hear over and over and over again. It creates beliefs and it creates polarized realities. Our problem is we live well, social media supports these thought bubbles, so
Yeah,
it will reinforce what you already believe. If you watch a certain news channel, it's going to reinforce what you already believe, and when you hear somebody else talk another perspective, oh, that's crazy, there's something wrong with that person, they don't believe what I believe. It's because their sense of reality is so strong and so rigid that they can't allow another perspective to come and threaten that reality, because they're afraid of what they don't know. It's, well, if this isn't true, then what is life? And it
yeah,
becomes a whole big thing. And it's really not that scary just to put your guard down and say, well, how do you see this? Man from across the country, man from across the world.
yeah,
What's really going on? Like, let's find some common ground. And I think that that's the whole premise behind Make America Talk Again.
yeah. That's good, man. And being able to do that requires a lot of context. I agree with you, and I think that's always the frustrating part is like primarily not necessarily in the group, but like in general, like whenever I'm engaging with people, because I love having conversations with people that have different thought patterns, if they're not repeating what they heard on CNN or something like that a lot of times, because that's just frustrating, right? But it's like if they're truly, yeah, yeah, like same thing on sure on the other side. But if it's like with somebody who has their own thoughts and they're able to articulate those thoughts in an interesting way, and they can actually add some context to the background behind it and all that, and it's actually more of an opportunity to really seek what do you think those attributes are? I guess is kind of what I'm getting at, is like what makes a person willing and able to learn, like worth learning from, and then but on the flip side is actually being able to teach and have that teachable spirit.
I think a lot of what we do stems from where we see ourselves in the future, what path we consider ourselves on. A lot of the information that I take in and reject are going to be based on where I want to go. You know, is this information going to help me? Is this information beneficial or not beneficial? And a lot of the times I'm not 100% sure, but my guess is that a lot of people don't have a clear vision for the future, so they're just kind of like just winging it. Whatever information is, like, you could take it or leave it, or they'll probably default to whatever's most comfortable for them. So if you realize, if your goal is bigger than you, and you know that you have to get rid of your ego and you need to connect with people in order to achieve your big picture goal, like I do, then it's a lot easier to have these conversations, because I try to not identify with one ideology, race, religion, or anything like that, because my goal and job here is to understand multiple people, and I can't do that if I'm the one that's determining what's right and wrong with each and every individual. That would just be my ego, you
Yeah.
know. So I'm just here to let be what is, and if I can offer love to any individual, regardless of what their identity is, then I think that's what, that's my personal life purpose, and that's what drives me in these conversations.
So inside of that, do you actually have a belief system
Yes.
that you operate by? You just don't talk about it, or what's the?
No, I do. I don't know if it's possible to not have a
I know
belief
that's what
system.
I'm thinking. No,
Yeah, you probably have to be dead,
right.
but I believe in love, man. I believe in love. I believe in compassion. I believe in understanding. I believe in introspection more so than anything. I believe in giving. I believe you got to give to receive. I believe in the basic good that all humans believe in, that we get taken away from due to fear. In every religion, you're going to see the same things. It's all based on love. Every
Yeah,
single religion is based on love, except maybe Satanism, but I don't know too much about that.
right.
Uh, but yeah, most religions, most belief systems are based on love, and they have all of the steps in order to achieve enlightenment, in order to achieve peace, in order to achieve all these things that we want, riches, whatever it is. Ask and you shall receive is, something that is constant throughout all the religions. But we get caught up in the material world and in the physical world, that we lose sight of the bigger picture goal, and it is to break chains between identities, between nationalities, between races, between even religions. And it's kind of crazy that how that works. That religion would um, pretty much coach you to open yourself up beyond your religion. But that's the way I see it. We're meant to
Yeah.
connect.
So when you say you believe in love, like what do you explain that to me? Like what is love? Define that for me.
I
Because
think love.
real quick, I want to preface that real quick because so many people use that word to the
Right.
point where it's like cheap. You know what I'm saying? Which is unfortunate because it is a powerful thing, right? But it's like everybody in their own mind has what that is like, and so it's important, I think, to have context on actual how they view that word before going into a conversation. So
Right. So to me, well, what love is the basic foundation from which everything rises. Love is all around us. Love is not, it's not an emotion, it's not a feeling, it's just what we are. It's the it's another name for the energy that we live through. It's the frequency and vibration. Nothing happens without love. No human being was born without love. you know Coming together, life being generated in any kind of way. That's what love is. God is love, right? So
yeah,
God is the all-seeing master, the all-knowing master, the one who provides life for us, the one that's what love is to me. And a lot of us, we kind of put it in a box as love is a gift that I give from me to you. And in a lot of cases that's a part of it, but that's not the whole. You can
right.
give
It's an
somebody love in a
expression
little
of it.
box.
Yeah,
But yeah, I think we should we should try to be love more so than to find love.
Yeah.
Right? If that makes sense.
Yeah. So you think to that point, I mean, I would say that probably the being versus having is kind of
Right.
more driven out of selfishness to some degree,
Right.
right?
Exactly.
So yeah, I had made a post a while back, and it went, I mean, hit pretty hard, but it was basically that selfishness and self interest or self love even is the root of satanic worship, you know?
Right.
And a lot of people responded out of that. They either loved it or they hated it. There was no middle ground, right? And
Yeah.
that post, what was I forgot your post. I want to kind of like, what was your response to that? Because you actually did respond something, and I'm interested to hear your take on that.
Yeah, I feel like I understood it. I understood what you meant, but I know exactly how people would misunderstand it because in all actuality, to love anything else, you must first love yourself. You can't give anything that you don't have. But the reason that you love yourself is not just just for self-service. The reason why you love yourself is so that you can love everybody else. So I understood your post in saying that if you're looking at self-love and that's the end result goal, then yes, you're going to be filled with ego, you're going to be filled with identity, you're going to be filled with selfishness, like as you said, and you're going to live in a pretty bad place mentally,
Yeah.
energetically, because you're not communicating with the world around you. You're not giving, you're not receiving, you're not reciprocating. And yeah, that's 100% true. Um, but to say self love is satanic is going to be triggering, and that's my specialty. So I would appreciate if you stop stepping on my toes.
Well, the drive out of that was mainly I was talking with a buddy of mine who's actually read the Satanic Bible. And basically the whole premise of all of that is, and then there was a guy named Aleister Crowley back in the 1800s who like a lot of the guys, forgot the guys, my brain's going blank on here because, oh God. Anyway, it was a rock band, but they would all like kind of like get around this whole idea of Crowley's like belief system, which essentially became demonic, which was do what you do, like do what you will do, you know, like and make everything like about your experience, right? And it was all about these things, and everything in the demonic world like that comes back to like that self-love, right? And like I think the thing is like people are labeling it self-love, but when you look at it, it's really an identity issue. And I think to all of what we're talking about in this conversation and why that's relevant is that when we start getting into conversations with people who are of differing opinions,
Right.
like man, all thoughts create actions and words, right? Like that's how we express what are our thoughts, right? But our
Right.
thoughts stem from our consciousness, and our consciousness stems from a source, and our source is either good, like God, or evil, right? Like that's how
Right.
like I look at it. So we have two forms of source, right, that essentially create our reality, because our words and our actions create our reality. And so that's where that whole thing was coming from. And that's the hard part about when you write something, is like from a context perspective, and then you got people who just don't believe that. So whatever, like the world's full of 7 billion people, they're going to be out there really. But so in trying to build relationships with people who are going against that kind of thing, what do you think that process looks like? Should you be trying to take to heart that people are not going to get something or whatever else, and try to smooth that over, or
Well, first off, one of the prime principles is never take anything personal. So that's
right,
that's definitely the first thing that you want to take into account. Yeah, people are gonna have their own belief systems. If you understand where it starts, they say that we get programmed subconsciously, mainly from years 1 to 7 in our lives.
yeah,
So a lot of our lives, we're just operating 90% of the time. We're operating off of that subconscious program that we received before we even knew we were alive or what life was about.
yeah,
Um, it's a select few that take a step back and say, "Hey, wait a minute. Um, I want to go somewhere, right? I have a destination in mind. Is my current thinking going to get me there? Yes or no?" And then if it's, well, let me look into it. That's what introspection is. And then you can start to pick away at that subconscious programming and change it. That's why I'm a mental hygienist, because I'll brainwash you into believing yourself. But in order to do that, you have to get into that subconscious mind. Repetition is the father of learning, and we've learned a lot of things that aren't beneficial to us as a whole. And
Yeah.
one thing you did also trigger another thought in me while you were talking, and it's about self-love. And I think that self-love isn't bad depending on what you identify as self, and it's going to tie back into that whole responsibility thing. There's a lot of text that you can find in even the Bible or any other religious text that says uh pretty much love your brother as if they are you.
Yeah.
And what I'm getting from a lot of with the collection of information that I found is that there is no difference between you and I, that we are the same, that we are a part of the bigger grand scheme. That when I talk about self, I'm not talking about my fleshy body. I'm talking about the entire universe. I'm talking about everybody that's in it. I'm taking responsibility for you as my brother because I want to give you love, and I can't influence you if I don't take responsibility for your personal situation or your experience.
Yeah.
And sometimes, if I can repeat myself, sometimes that doesn't mean interfering. Sometimes it means taking a step back. But still, the goal is to save the life that's flailing around in the water.
Yeah. That's fascinating. So we've talked a lot about racial stuff in the past and all that, and I'm like, I mean, we can go as deep as you want to or whatever else. I'm not going to put you on blast or anything, but I'm just kind of more wondering about like, um, in that, like we look at kind of the stuff like reparations and all this kind of stuff, which I think you're a proponent of, right?
Sure.
Okay. So, and I look at all that kind of stuff, and I'm like, man, what you're saying, and I can see how maybe you'd come at that stuff because to me, like that's only going to create more issues, right? And then even with that, does that mean that it's all done? And I'm not trying to sound like an ignorant dude here, and I'm not trying to prove anything. I'm literally like I am sincerely looking for that path forward inside of this conversation, right? But it's like whenever we talk about reparations or we talk about, I know a lot of people don't think that it's a white man's place to talk about it because we got privilege and we got all that kind of stuff or whatever else. And it's like when we get into that and that kind of stuff, it frankly pisses me off because I'm sitting there thinking like, dude, if we're going to be a part of the solution, then we got to be a part of the conversation, and like
Right.
regardless of the perspective of it. And it doesn't take away the fact that we all have that part of our lives that we wish would never happened, right? We probably all come from some sort of trauma or something at some point in our lives. And if we haven't, then that could actually be probably worse than not having experienced that because we don't have that perspective, right? So we've all got that path that we've had to take to get to where we are today, right? And then moving forward. So how does all of that fit in as far as into that line where it's like, man, if we're all taking personal responsibility and we're trying to find that path forward, how does stuff like reparations from slavery and stuff like that fit into that from your perspective?
Well, it actually fits in perfectly. I think that but I think that the conversation runs off the tracks because not all of us are looking at the same information, the same facts, the same experiences, right? So if
Yeah.
we were to take responsibility and realize that different policies like redlining, like slavery overall, like the Willie Lynch whole era, is affecting a portion of the community today, and it is the responsibility of the country to not elevate but to equalize the playing field, then I think more people would be on board. But a lot of people feel as though this is some sort of special treatment, that this is some sort of something that is not deserved, something that's going to be wasted, something that isn't going to do any good for the country. But all in all, it's like either the country continues to go the way it is at the expense of the people that essentially had a big part in building the country in the first place, or we can all come together, take personal responsibility for the entire thing. A lot of people say, well, I wasn't alive back then. You wasn't alive back then, so that's not my responsibility. Guess what? You're identifying this situation as outside of your identification, right? So now you're not taking responsibility. Now you're the lifeguard that sees somebody flailing around in the water, but because whatever reason you're gonna let them drown or whatever. Or you can, and another big thing that we can do is psychologically make up a reason as to why they're flailing around in the water and why they deserve to drown, you know, and then our conscience is clear and we can walk the other way. And it's not cool. It's not cool. I also understand how the other perspective will look at it as, well, if a certain group of people doesn't take personal responsibility for their own situation, then more money isn't going to help anything at all. And in a lot of cases, that is true. But at the same time, there is a portion of the society that is trying to, you know, do good for the world, that is trying to put some funds to good use, that will take a small blessing and triple it, quadruple it, 10x it, and do good for the country. And there's a lot more people that are like that in this group of people than the country, I think, wants to, you know, wants to understand. And a lot of it is because of the media. You know, the media paints, you know, some of us uh, in a dull light. A lot of us are pretty dull. You know, I'm not to be misunderstood, but no group of people is perfect. And when we realize that any imperfection that I may have as an individual, whether I'm white, black, Korean, any Asian, anything, Hispanic, any imperfection that I'm able of having, any other group of people is also able of having that same, you know, you know, detractor, whatever the case may be. So we're both human. So we're both operating with the same human laws, which means that if this person is in a difficult situation, it is my responsibility to at least consider their perspective and any solution that might actually, you know, lift that person up. Because if I'm not, then I'm being selfish and satanic, right?
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, I think on the perspective of like reparations, when I look at it, I'm trying to identify my own thoughts in that because I've been vehemently against it, right?
Yeah.
And not because I don't want people to be blessed. That's not it at all. In fact, I think it's quite the opposite. I think that when you put people in a scenario who, and I'm not saying all blacks don't have money or whatever else, but like if you like, I think a lot of the drive is because it's like, oh man, I'm gonna have some money, you know, and then, you know, like my family has been poverty type, you know, like some of them, right, and all this, and every year around the time of tax season, they get that and they go blow that money
Right.
on junk, you know what I'm saying, and because it's not a matter of having the money or not having the money, it's here and it's
Right.
here, right, and so I'm not convinced still that that's the path forward, but I'm not opposed to having that conversation and really trying to understand. Because every time I've seen anything, when people are talking about it and all this stuff, I don't even know if we'll put this one out there because it's going to make me sound like, you know, I'm like judging on this and you know, like we're doing all this. But like when you look at it from the perspective of someone who's, you know, like had to kind of climb their way out, and yeah, I know circumstances have been different, but that's been my path, right? You start at the bottom and you kind of move forward in that. And it's like, uh, how I don't quite see how having money is going to make it happen. I know in that person's mind, they believe that wholeheartedly, but I've seen a lot of arguments of like, well, when we get that money, we're going to go invest in black businesses, black communities, all this kind of stuff. And then it's like, it's still, all it does is perpetuate racism to me in that regard, right? And it's like, if we're all in this together, truly, shouldn't we be trying to figure out how do we get mentors and stuff in and people taking action to come in and just be a part of that solution? But like every time that I've had conversations, like for in your group, for example, where we've tried to do that was like, dude, I'm not listening to you. Who are you? You know what I'm saying? Like from the white guy perspective, right? So it's like, why even freaking try, you know, half the time. I mean, that's kind of what goes on. And I'm not a guy who gives up necessarily, but it's like I'm going to put my attention and my limited amount of time and abilities and all these kind of things into places where it's going to grow, right? Like a garden. So if you keep going and like essentially trying to cast your seeds upon,
Yeah. Just plant the seeds.
yeah, you want to put it in fertile soil. You know
Right.
what I'm saying? So that's the weird dynamic. And I'm not saying I have all the answers or whatever, or even the full story, but that's kind of my perspective to that whole thing.
Right.
So,
Right.
I mean,
Here's the
what do you
thing.
say about that?
Here's the thing. So
Yeah.
it could go that way. It could go to waste. It could, there's a lot of consumers. Most of us are consumers in this capitalist society. Actually, I want to say two things. The first thing is what I was already saying, is that if you give somebody a bunch of money, there's also a likelihood and a chance that that person will figure out that money is not the solution.
Yeah.
A lot of the cases, people win lotteries and all types of stuff and end up worse than where they were. And hopefully, if people can have the experience of money and realize that money isn't everything, actually, money is fake. Money is an idea. That's a fact. It is created at will, pretty much, based on certain metrics, but it's not a limited resource. It is created by man. And if we had an abundance of it, then we can start. There's a chance that we might start to think abundantly. There's a lot of people that can't even imagine what would I do with $10,000. As low as $10,000 is, what would I do with $1,000,000? And the inability to even imagine that is detrimental, is keeping them where they are. But if you can at least, because you can start creating thoughts that center around having an amass of money, right? So if you had that money, it's like, okay, what do I want to do? A lot of people are gonna be smart about it. A lot of people are gonna be like, okay, I know money is here today, gone tomorrow. So let me do something smart about this. A lot of people will not do something smart and they will get a lesson,
Yeah.
right? Now,
Well, and
the
I'm not
second,
necessarily pigeonholing the black community or anything in that regard either. It's more about, I guess, what I'm getting at is it's here, right? And I
yeah,
mean, if the true, like, how did how do you think that, like, guys like Jay-Z, who supposedly, like, I don't know, I don't listen to rap that often, but like he came from the streets and all this kind of stuff to go on to be a billionaire. Like, what was it about him that was able to kind of get that, do you think?
I think he made a decision. I think he was in a bad situation that he didn't want to be in, and he made a decision to visualize and imagine bigger things for himself, and that drove him in the micro decisions that he was making. And a lot of us are trying. A lot of us don't have that big picture vision. A lot of us are well, when I say us, I just mean people in general. A lot of us, have a limited belief or a limited vision as to where we can go. Therefore, we never consider how it would feel or what we would do in this situation. And if you can't imagine that, then there's no hope for the present moment, right? No hope for the future, no hope for the present. And in the past, if you have a lot of regrets, that makes you even more fearful of the future, because things haven't been working out all along.
Yeah.
They probably won't work out in the future. And that pessimistic idea is one that's going to keep you in a destitute situation.
So I guess, dude, as I think this through, I'm like, first of all, like I was kind of doing some research, and it's like upwards of $14.2 trillion is what slave, like the reparations could cost.
Hmm.
But adding that to the overall debt that we have would be literally suicide for the nation. Like there would be no getting out of that at that point. We'd be done. Like so, huh?
Money isn't real. It's not
But it,
real.
it still is like the pulse. I get what you're saying, but
It's
there's
just a number.
still, but not really, because people own, like, so China owns a lot of the United States and all that. It's like from a financial perspective, it's like suicide. Like it would, at very least, and I get that you're saying it's not real, but it is. Like to some degree, there are like institutions that rise and fall on this and all this other stuff, and people, the very people that you're talking about wanting to help. Okay, let's go bankrupt America and put that in there, and now the dollar's worth nothing, and we're all back down to zero again.
It's funny. America is not gonna allow itself to go bankrupt. Not the big banks are not gonna allow it. You already saw it in 2008 when the banks are in trouble. Something magical happens, does it not? It does, and it always will, because they control the money supply. They know that the money isn't really based on anything except our belief in it. That is the only thing money is based on. When we took the dollar bill off of the gold standard, it became monopoly money, is what it
Right.
became. It is inevitable that this fiat currency will crash at some point. Screenshot me. it will
Yeah,
crash
and
at
that's
some
my
point.
point. Like it will crash at some point because all countries have their end. Like even
Right,
Rome, these greatest nations in the world have at some point come to their end. I don't think
right.
we need to be speeding that up by frivolously, just giving out, billions and trillions of dollars, on a deal. And I mean, that's a whole other conversation. I mean, we can go down that route for sure. But it's
Right.
like I want to focus on like how do we bridge that gap between, you know, like
I think I think number one is we agree that the target is the mind. The target is the perspective. The target is, giving people the ideas that they can succeed, that they can do better, that they can
yeah,
provide for their families. The challenge is that there's a media that will constantly give you the negative outlook on not only your own situation but other people's situations. They purposely do that. They will get the news that they know is going to trigger you. Why? Because they get ratings because of that. Not only do they get ratings, but society gets to continue on because there's a group of people, a mass of people that are just taking what they can get.
right.
You know, so
Well, I understand, but that's
if you're
what
the
people
giver in the
respond to
situation,
also.
control it. Say it again.
That's what people respond to also. Like,
Right.
so we actually do that to ourselves, right? And that's the weird thing is like, I've been in marketing long enough to know that for all the manipulation and stuff that takes place in every capacity, whether it be marketing, politics, whatever else,
Yeah.
we demand it for ourselves while we're sitting there at the same point saying, I don't want that. I don't want that. I don't want that. You
Right.
know what I'm saying? Like, it's weird. It's like this weird thing. And that's why, like, when we talk about bridging the gap, and we've talked about before too, like tribalism and how people are starting to
Yeah.
segregate again. And it's like, man, that's not good. It really isn't. And I get too, wisdom and grit is a bit of a tribe, man. I'm
Yeah.
perpetuating the issue, which is weird because it's like you have to give the people what they want, like, because if you try to be that lone ranger over here saying, hey, don't do this, you're just cast out and you die broken alone on some island with a freaking volleyball named Wilson. You know what I'm saying? Like, and
Yeah.
it's kind of like like your whole life is upset as a result of it. And it's like,
Right.
dude, how do we get past all of that? We really do need, and I don't even know if there is a single answer.
I think that I think trying to be like Jesus Christ, and other deities, uh, is the right way to go. I think that there's a big problem where we disconnect ourselves from Jesus. Well, we'll say, I'm me, that's Jesus. He was great, me not so much. You know, I think that the story of Jesus Christ was a story of the human condition. It was when God came down to earth to live as a human and what God would do as a human. Therefore, you have the power to do the same things and you should strive to do so. And that's it's one thing that's always going to be stuck in my mind. It's just like, you know, you're a devout Christian, right? And then something isn't going right in your life and you played a part in it, right?
Yeah.
Maybe instead of the part that you played, you would have molded yourself to be more like what would Jesus do, right? And I'll
Yeah.
say, what would Jesus do? And I got a response one time, well, I'm not Jesus. And I'm like, well, that's the problem. That's the problem. You there's a disconnect between you and God. You need to be one and the same. Jesus is supposed to live where? In your heart,
Yeah.
right? And in your mind. That's you're supposed to merge.
Yeah.
But I think
I
a lot
think
of us
there's
miss that.
some elements of truth, like in my belief, like of that, right? And I think we're on the same point. It comes back down to identity, all
Yeah,
of it, every single bit of it. And so while I disagree that the Bible is just a bunch of stories that teach us how to be good people and kind of be like Jesus and all that kind of stuff, it really is not. Like, dude, the whole book was about Jesus
right.
and it's all pointing back to him. And like the problem a lot of times comes back to people uh thinking that they have any part to play in it because we respond in love. And this is really going back to what you were talking about earlier with love. It is a powerful concept because God created it, right? So when we
Right.
look at it from the perspective of, okay, dude, I know who I am, and because of what Jesus did, and this is how I see it, right? So I'm not
Right.
trying to over talk you or anything. I'm just this is that.
Yeah.
Uh, but that Jesus did everything. Like his whole life showed us how to live for sure,
Right.
but we are imperfect human beings, and that's why we see stuff like that happen in the church, and everybody's like, I knew it, God's evil, because of like Joe Bob over here is the pastor and he's having an affair with his wife or whatever, you know. And it's like, oh dude, he's a human, you know what I'm saying? Like, that's not to say that's what good humans do, but you know, it is what humans do to some degree. We fall, but because of what Jesus did, and if we truly give our heart to Jesus and we have a relationship with God through that,
Right.
then God sees us as Jesus, right? So we're like, our response is not in fear, but instead out of love. Like,
Right.
whenever a father is like, son, I love you, they're not necessarily going to go out and start going out and, you know, doing things that they know are going to upset the father, because of the love that they have and the reverence that they have for the father, not because of fear that he's going to come and whip them, because we all know that doesn't work. Right. We just keep it quiet, right? We don't talk about it. We try to hide it because whatever else. But it's like, if we truly love someone, then we respond in that love. Mm-hmm. Right. And I think that's the big problem, man. We got all these people walking around like who don't know who they are, right? They reject God. They reject Jesus. They say all these things that they don't even know that they're saying. And I get that. Mm-hmm. And it's like, we don't have relationships with people. And the Christians hang out a lot of times and they're like, we're all in this big box over here, you know, saying how much we love God, but then we go out into the world and then we're like, yeah, well, you know, you're dirty, you're nasty, this and that, you know. And it's kind of like, dude, like, that has to stop.
Yeah, it's counterproductive.
Yeah. Yeah, I believe it's discipleship, bro. You know, relationships just like what you and I have. We've jumped on the phone a few times and we have good conversations. You challenge me, I challenge you. I mean,
for sure.
Yeah. What were you gonna say? I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I forgot. I forgot, but let me say something, I guess.
No, 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 you don't have to fill the gap, man. No, I apologize. I'm getting all like, this is a passionate subject for sure, man. Like, you know, like, I don't know, man. I look at kind of what is happening, and I love that about how we can have these conversations and kind of dive in, because people aren't given the room to be wrong.
Right.
You know?
You know, what's right and wrong anyway? It's all subjective. I mean, if you accept that, if you believe that there is an objective truth, an objective morality, an objective right and wrong, then that is another limitation, because there's right for this person and there's right for this person, there's wrong for this person, there's wrong for another person. Everybody is different, you know, and only God can really say, you know, was right or wrong. And then a lot of people don't even agree on what God is saying. So it basically comes down to psychology, you know, the individual psychology, because any person that, like you said, would be in the Christian realm, in a Christian circle, and then start judging other people, you know, against their Christian, you know, beliefs, or against their Christian standards, is essentially expressing a turmoil that they have going on internally. And then other people may respond to that, take it personally. That doesn't make it any better either. But they're also responding from an internal turmoil as well. Because if I said, if I was trying to insult you and I said, and I called you an Arab, exactly, you would laugh. Why? Because there's nothing inside of you that says that is true.
Yeah.
You know? But if somebody would say it, that it starts within them, that means whatever they're saying exists within them, whatever hate, whatever judgment exists within them. And the person that responds to it negatively, it also exists within that person as well, even if it's just subconsciously and they're not conscious of it. If like attracts like, you know? So going back to the solution, it's just loving. It's love. And it's more so, it's loving yourself, because when you start, Dr. Sebi said it, he said, when you start to love yourself, you begin to love the whole world. And that's a deep, deep, deep level of unconditional love that is quite challenging to get to.
Yeah, kind of going back to that, though, it comes back to that identity, I believe, is what I'm saying. Like, so when God, what he has done and who we are through Jesus, right? Like, then we have that ability to bring that on as the as our inheritance. And when we understand that and all that God's done because of the love that he gave, then we can operate from that. So my part of my argument on that was it's not self-love or self-love is the enemy, but it's like when we understand we love God and we understand the love he has for us, we operate out of that.
Right.
You know, so I think it's a mislabeling or how people label things, which is extremely important, by the way. That's a whole other conversation we could go down.
I think it's a tool. I don't think that psychologically associating what you are with a certain nationality, race, or religion is helpful. I think that if we knew that we are essentially a bunch of atoms, we are energy, we are vibration, we have the power to influence, we have the power to uplift, and that is all we identified as, then we can use our social constructs to help us connect with groups. Like, we're proud Americans, but at the core, we're humans. We're energy. So that means that, yes, we're Americans, but when we go over to the Middle East, they may be of a different nationality, but at the core, they're humans. They are also energy. So there shouldn't be any animosity there. But it does also take them to have that perspective as well. So it goes a lot into identity. It goes a lot into the social constructs, even male and female. A lot of that, I think, needs to be broken down so that we can realize what we truly are and what we have in common. A lot of us on the planet, actually all living beings on the planet, are far more alike than they're different. But we like to look at the 3%, the 1.5% difference, and that makes up, our entire experience. Most of us are like 90 plus. We're more closely related to a watermelon, than we're all mostly water. Like, if you go down to the fundamentals of what creates life, and you realize that there's no real reason to fight it. I didn't put myself here. I'm not going to take myself out of here. What I do here essentially isn't really going to matter, to the grand scheme of things. So I'll do what makes me happy, and what makes me happy is making other people happy. And I'll do that until I die, and that's it.
So what if somebody came to you and said that the way forward was to not make other people happy? Would you change that?
But that would be their perspective. It would be based on their information. The information that I have right now is that spreading joy is the ultimate joy.
Yeah.
So they would have to offer me some type of information that would have to resonate with me, and I would have to look into it. It would be a whole process, but I would be open to it. That's the whole thing. The one thing that I know more than anything else is that I don't know shit.
Yeah. I think that's probably the biggest part of this whole thing is like walking into things like that, which is so counterintuitive to being an expert, right?
Yeah.
In this age where it's like, hey, we want to be an expert on something, but if we walk into a scenario, I mean, I don't know, man. I think like we've uncovered quite a bit here, but it's a much deeper hole than an hour is going to give us, for sure.
Has it been an hour already?
Yeah, right at it. So that's yeah. Well, dude, I want to open up for anybody. I'm not here on the deal, but for as time goes on, anybody that wants to contribute to this conversation in the comments section on the Facebook page, Wisdom and Grit, or on the group here. And then once this is up on YouTube and on iTunes, if you're a man, come to the Wisdom and Grit Facebook page, group page, and contribute to this conversation, because I think this is a worthy conversation to be had, and it's got a million different ways it could go. But dude, I hope you'll be around, in there to have conversation with some of the guys that are responding as well. Yeah. Well, Talmadge, dude, thank you for being here today, man. You're a blessing, and I really appreciate your willingness and openness to having these conversations. And, we definitely need to have more of them for sure.
I agree. Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
You're welcome, man. Well, everybody else that's listening, thank y'all for taking the time to be here today. I really appreciate y'all being a part of what we're doing here, the movement that we're creating within Wisdom and Grit, and the mission that we have to build the men that build the world. We'll talk to you next time. And again, if you have any questions or any comments or anything like that, make sure you leave those in the comments section, and Talmadge and I will be there to respond. Y'all have a blessed day.